Welcome to the English Homemaker podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things home, a realistic but fresh view of homemaking from the suburbs of the south of England. I'm your host, Alissa Evelyn. Welcome to episode 20 of the English Homemaker. Hello everybody, how are you today? I hope you're having a great day, whatever it is that you're doing, wherever you're listening to this from. I have a very exciting episode for you today. I don't know how long it's going to be. It could be a short one, could be a long one, but it's going to be dense and interesting, and hopefully there'll be something for everyone in this. It's going to be about my natural first aid kit, the herbal home remedies we used, homeopathic things, what we use for prevention and to cure things like colds and just regular everyday things, as well as just some slightly weird and wonderful things that I'm going to throw in there and some stories that I've got to share. Before I do this episode, of course, I'm going to need to do a major disclaimer because I am not a medical professional. I have not trained in any of this. I have been interested in herbal home remedies for my entire adult life and a lot of my teenage years. So these are things I have been using for a really long time. And so I can only say that they work on me. I know that a lot of herbal home remedies can be very strong and very powerful, and I will share some of those stories because I think I used to think they were you could take however much you like and it would be okay, but dosing is very, very important. So I'll say that as well. But yeah, this is all my perspective, things that have worked on me. You do need to make sure you think it through, check with a doctor, especially if you're taking any other kinds of medication, because a lot of medicines come from herbs and plants, but they're just a lot more concentrated, so they might work funny with each other, so that's really important, and you might get some different side effects. But hopefully the things I share today will be things that some of you already use, things that lots of you already have around the house, and I just hope that it's interesting and that you can go away and get your first aid kit out, and if you don't have one, that you can go and make one, and this will be helpful to you going forwards. So the first sort of weapon in our arsenal at home is prevention. I always like to make sure that the kids get plenty of outside time, lots of sunshine, lots of exercise, lots of fresh air. We make sure our bellies are full of nourishing foods, local and seasonal where possible, and organic as where possible too, and that we get really good rest, and we sort of learn to understand when our bodies are requiring proper rest. And that usually means for us vegging on the sofa with a really good old movie and going to bed early. And when our bodies are asking for that, that's what we do. We are very good at that. But the other things are so important. That sunshine, exercise, fresh air, good food makes up for a huge amount of our immune system support and making sure we don't get sick in the first place. And then obviously with things like cuts and scrapes, it's all about being safe, making safe choices, and just being a bit smart when you're out. I feel like I could definitely have a whole other podcast episode about how to make sure your house is toxin free, because there's so many things you can do there, from what you cook with to making sure you're not using like aerosols or plug-in sprays or things like that. And there are so many very effective alternatives to those things. So let's assume that all of you are doing the best you can to prevent being sick in the first place, and you've ditched toxins from your home as much as you can. How did I get into herbal remedies? So I was a child of the 90s, so I grew up with Calpol and ibuprofen and antibiotics all the time, and I was about 12, I think, maybe 11, 12, somewhere in there. I met a lovely girl called Charlotte, who I'm still extremely good friends with today and who I'm very grateful for. Her family have been taking homeopathic medicines since forever. She introduced me to arnica and flower remedies, and just she sort of used them like I would have used like a paracetamol pill. I was fascinated with the whole idea of herbal home remedies and homeopathic medicine, and that there was this sort of very time-honoured tradition of taking teas and tinctures. And then I was introduced to Neal's Yard Remedies, because there was a Neal's Yard Remedies store in our town, our nearby town, and gosh, I loved and still love that store. I'm grateful it still exists. They've got all these wonderful teas and tinctures that they can make for you behind the counter, and they've got a really lush line of skincare products. But for me, it's all about the kind of other side of the business that they do. It's all about the teas and the tinctures, and the knowledge that they have there and the skilled people that they have that can put those together for you. So then it was kind of a gradual process from there. I've just been learning things off and on ever since. I've had a few moments where I learned something really big and it is sort of life-changing for me, and I'm really hoping that some of the things I share today are like that for you, and there are things that you can try also. So let me share a couple of those stories with you. So when I was 21, 22, I went to Neil's Old Remedies to get a kind of supplement or tincture or something for jet lag. And they made me a tincture of valerian and some other kind of herbs. And I did this big round the world trip. So we were going to fly a full circle round from one to the other and deal with lots of different stops. And I think the whole tincture bottle lasted me the whole trip. They told me how to dose it and it worked an absolute charm. It was like a miracle. Valerian also works to sort of calm anxiety and things like that, as well as the jet lag. So it worked tremendously well, kept me very calm, kept me feeling like I don't even remember any jet lag. I might have been a little bit tired on a day or two, but I didn't have any other side effects or anything. So I felt like this was some kind of crazy magic, this valerian. I don't remember what else they put in it because it was such a long time ago. And then in the last sort of 5 years or so, I've learned about Ayurvedic remedies, and that's been a really big learning curve for me. So in Sanskrit, Ayurveda means the science of life, and it is known to be one of the oldest sort of healing modalities or healing sciences around the world. It has its roots in kind of India and its sort of surrounding nations. And I find it utterly fascinating. I think something so old that still works is worth paying some attention to. So I listened to a bunch of podcasts a few years ago about Ayurveda and just sort of absorbed as much information as I could. For me, there was something really critical when I learned what my dosha was and really understood sort of what that meant. And it was actually like the simplest thing. So doshas, there are 3 different types of doshas. There's vata, pitta and kapha. And they are kind of ways of categorizing different types of people, basically. So I'm a vata type, which is air and ether. And we tend to be sort of cold and lanky and bit more nervous and a bit more restless. And the key for me in understanding that I was this particular type was that really to counteract that innate part of me, that I should really mostly only be eating like warming foods and warming tea, and that it kind of makes it worse if I have cold things. That it's fine in something like on a really hot day, of course I can have a cold drink because then the season itself is a hot season and that makes sense. But for the most of the time, and even throughout the summer, you'll only find me having hot things. I really try and avoid cold drinks. And when I do have a cold drink or a cold meal, then it just doesn't sit right with me. And that has been a really fascinating learning for me. There are, like I said, there are 3 different kinds of doshas, and you might fall into a different category where really, you thrive on spicy foods or cooler foods or raw foods. And I just find it all very, very fascinating. And that has really, really worked wonders for me. So my tea cabinet is another huge part of my arsenal and something that we all use, and I've used with the kids since they were little. So I'm going to just tell you what I've got in my tea cabinet because I think that could be interesting. So the herbal teas I keep on hand are fennel, meadowsweet, chamomile, yarrow, tulsi, rose, lemon balm and peppermint. And they all have their own sort of separate functions, things I use them for. And I think that's the wonder of herbs, actually, and herbal teas, is that they're very light and that also they can perform many different functions. A lot of herbs are really multi-purpose. And a lot of people just believe that the herbs know what they're supposed to do. They know where they're supposed to go. They know how they're supposed to work. So some of them are anti-inflammatory, some of them are anti-spasmodic, some of them are antifungal. There's lots of uses for different herbs. So I'm just going to tell you why I stock them and what I use them for. It's really important with herbal teas that you steep them for the right amount of time. They can get too strong, some of them, especially something like chamomile. Most of them you want to brew for about 5 minutes. If it's a root, like a marshmallow root, maybe 8 minutes. But you don't want to leave the bag in for too long like you might do like with a red bush or a regular tea. So fennel is a lovely one that we grow in the garden. It's a really beautiful flower and herb to grow. It's very tall, so it provides lots of structure for the garden and seems to just like to grow absolutely everywhere. And the seeds are really, really abundant. I have taken fennel for 2 reasons. Firstly is for digestion. That's where I use it mostly. I like to use it in cooking, but I mostly use it as a tea. And then the other reason I've used fennel is in lactation cookies. So ground up and put in lactation cookies, they can help relieve the colic in the babies if the mother is breastfeeding, and they can also promote more milk. The one for me that I use most often, have used most often, is meadowsweet, and that's because it's anti-inflammatory, it helps with aches and pains, and so anytime I feel like I've got a sore muscle or joint, I will have a cup of meadowsweet, and it seems to do the trick, works better than an ibuprofen for me. And I do believe meadowsweet and aspirin have some kind of connection. I think maybe aspirin comes from meadowsweet in some way. So it works incredibly well, but because it's in its whole herb form, I just think it seems to work much better for me. Chamomile tea has been so well used with the kids, as well as the fennel. I use fennel and chamomile a lot when the kids just have a bit of a funny tummy. They feel like they're not digesting properly, something hurts in their tummy. I'll make them a kind of bit of an infusion of chamomile and fennel. Chamomile is also really good for anxiety and stress and helping you get to sleep. So it's a really lovely one for the end of the day when maybe you've eaten a little bit too much and you probably just need your tummy to sort of relax a little bit and your brain to start going to sleep. I just think it's a really lovely one for everyone in the family. Yarrow is another one that I grow in the garden, and I find huge amounts of use for simply in, like, if I have I've eaten something funny and my tummy is kind of spasming, where someone might use something like a buscopan, I use yarrow and I make a cup of yarrow tea, and that really seems to soothe it, stop it from spasming, and just figure everything out. Yarrow is one of these, again, really multi-purpose herbs that has been used for centuries by so many different cultures. It grows really easily in the garden, kind of like a weed, and it's got these like feathery, frondy bits. So you would spot it anywhere you went in these sort of white flowers, but they can also be lots of different colours actually. But yarrow is also very delicious. I really like the flavour of yarrow. It's quite a particular flavour, but it is very good for all sorts of things. Tulsi tea, which is also known as holy basil, basil. Did I just say basil? Basil. Holy basil. Holy basil? Anyway, Tulsi tea. Maybe that's why they called it Tulsi, to stop the confusion. Tulsi I use for like a kind of anti-stress tea. It also tastes really delicious, kind of minty, really, really nice. Rose petals I keep, I mean, technically, I guess that's not really a herb, but I keep them for the old saying, the skin and the soul. And they're supposed to be very lovely for your skin and soothe your soul. And I do find any day I feel I need a little pick-me-up, I usually make a tea of rose, and it's really lovely. Often combine it with hibiscus because it's a sort of nice combination. Lemon balm I keep solely for the purpose of picking me up on days where I feel a little bit low. Lemon balm is really well known for kind of helping with depression, and so I have it a lot in the winter months when I'm just feeling a little SAD, and it seems to work a charm. The last one I keep, and again it's something I grow myself, is mint, usually peppermint. Really, really good for indigestion, gas and nausea, lots of those sort of things. Again, it's a tea that lots of people have and take. It's lovely to take after a meal, especially if you feel like you've eaten too much or kind of overly rich foods, then it's a really, really good one to keep on hand. So there are another couple of herbs I'd like to keep on hand. I'd love to have marshmallow root on hand and some red raspberry leaf on hand for different types of purposes, but I think those two could be really good additions. If you're interested in herbs and herbal teas, I've got some resources for you. So as I was doing that, I was having a look to make sure I wasn't talking total garbage from a couple of books. I've got Bartram's Encyclopedia of Herbal Medicine. You have to take this one with a pinch of salt. It's very old. The joy of it is it's in alphabetical order, so you can just be like, ooh, I want to fix hypothermia, and you can go and find the H bit, or, oh, I want to know what the Californian poppy does, or what makes a good nasal decongestant. You can tell I'm flicking through this. What's good for psoriasis, and what do sunflower seeds do? And all of that's in here, but it is pretty old. So like I say, you have to take some of it with a pinch of salt and be a bit smart about what you're reading. The other one as a really good introduction is Rosemary Gladstar's Medicinal Herbs. That's got some really basic ones in it. It is a beginner's guide, but I do find that really good. She goes through the basics of like making tinctures and teas, and there's quite a lot of depth on each particular herb, which I find really helpful. And then I've got the Herb Society's Complete Medicinal Herbal. Again, that goes through every single herb. I think that has more herbs than the Rosemary Gladstar book. It has pictures. It tells you like dosing and how to apply it. Like it's got how to do infusions and tinctures and how to do decoctions and mouthwashes and chest rubs of all these different kinds of herbs. And that's particularly useful. It's got pictures as well of how you might find it and what it looks like. So that one's really, really useful. And then if you're out and about, I've got the Collins Nature Guide, Herbs and Healing Plants of Britain and Europe. And that's got pictures of everything. If you're out and about and you want to know what meadowsweet looks like, or I don't know what plantain looks like, then those are in there. I'll make sure those are all listed in the sort of description part of the podcast. Okay, now we're going to open up my first aid kits. Now I have two. I have one smaller one that I keep in my bag and I have with me everywhere that we go. And then I have a bigger one that I keep in the house. So I'll open up the little one and describe what is in there and explain, and then I'll open up the big one. So the little one just fits in like a tiny little sort of pouch. It's really, really small. It's probably about A5 size, and it's got like 2 zipped sections. So talking of one of my kind of most important things that I have always got on hand is tea bags. So I've got pucker tea because they come in their own sort of separate packaged bag, so you can kind of take them with you wherever you go. So I've got a couple of tea bags just to warm people up. It's really important to stay warm, and if it's like a cold day or you're out and you're, I don't know, there's so many times where I need a tea bag and I can't get a regular cup of tea, and yeah, there we go. I've got some alcohol wipes. I've oddly got in this section like a sewing kit because we don't need that on humans, but sometimes that's important. Again, keep people warm. I've got a bunch of plasters. Now, I know plasters can be a little controversial. I don't know why. I love a plaster. Plasters are fabulous for a short-term purpose, and I think they're really useful. And then I've got a tick remover tool because I don't know about you, but I live near woods where there are a lot of ticks. And then in the bigger section, I've got all sorts. I'm going to try and take it all out. So I do have some very serious sort of allopathic medicine. I've got Buscopan, I've got paracetamol, I've got Quells, which is like travel sickness stuff. I've got Diorolite and diarrhea relief tablets because, you know, if you're out for the day, you might need one of those. And then I've also got a sanitary pad, very important, and some Compeed, which is those really amazing like blister plasters. They are the best blister plasters. And actually, the funny thing about the Compeed is that we variably don't use them, but I've given them out all the time to like ladies on like, you know, evenings out or something like that. And I'm in the bathroom and someone's sort of rubbing the back of their heel and I'll be like, "Ooh, do you need one of these?" And so they end up going out to other people who are wearing like high heels or kind of, I don't know, on long walks, maybe like funny shoes that they've not worn before. And they are incredible. I'd highly recommend them. They're very expensive, but they're worth it. I also carry those kind of like travel sickness pressure bands, which can be for the kids, can be for me. And none of us actually really get travel sick, but on a longer journey, or if anyone's feeling nauseous, I feel like it's sort of a helpful thing to have on hand. And then I have like a peppermint stick for your forehead. So if you get a headache, this is something I discovered when I was about 16. If you can find yourself a peppermint stick that is specifically for this, this one's got like a little roller ball on the top, and it's got an instructions packet that will tell you how and where and for how long you're supposed to rub it on. But peppermint essential oil can basically cure the majority of my headaches. So I always carry around a peppermint stick, although I haven't used it in a really long time. I did go through a phase of having quite a lot of headaches, so I always have it with me. And the brand for that one is Pure Essentiel. It's a really lovely brand that I discovered when I lived in Belgium, and they do lots of essential oil remedies. And then the only other two things I have in here are a Calendula Cuts and Grazes skin salve. which is gorgeous. And I think I use mostly on myself and works a charm. I don't know why, but the kids don't love it. I think they've never really had it, oddly. So it's just they kind of are happy to sort of bleed everywhere and it's sort of fine. But I'm definitely more of I'll clean it, I'll put some of the Cuts and Graces salve on it and it'll be fine in a couple of hours. So I really love that, and I replace that whenever it dies. And the other thing I use a lot of and I reach for in this bag is I've got a bark rescue remedy spray, which if you've never had, it's a flower essences spray. And if you're ever in a kind of tricky situation, say you're feeling a bit homesick or a bit anxious or I don't know, any kind of situation where you need some calm, Rescue Remedies is amazing. So that's everything in the little first aid kit. Now I'm going to go through the big chunky one that I keep at home. I keep it somewhere that the kids know where it is if they need it, but can't accidentally stumble across it. So inside it, we have a forehead temperature thermometer thing, which I find really, really helpful, because when the kids are complaining that something is wrong, I can be like, oh, let's check your temperature, and it will clearly indicate to me whether they are really poorly or like feeling a bit under the weather, if you know what I mean. And it's sort of having a fever or not having a fever is a good determiner of that. I've got a bunch of alcohol wipes. Again, it's funny, I carry them because I think you're sort of supposed to carry them, but I don't always remember to use them. I'd only use them if the situation called for it, like there was definitely going to be some bacteria in there or something. I've got a bunch of other different types of thermometers, like baby thermometers. I don't know why. I've got some tweezers, very important to have tweezers. My brother keeps different types of tweezers, I know, for like splinters or really small ticks. So that's something to consider, but I haven't really found the need for different types of tweezers yet. But I suppose the point is to be prepared, because I did once have to go to hospital and get something removed on one of my children. I can't remember what, because I didn't have a fine enough pair of tweezers. So I probably should get a pair of fine tweezers. I've got a variety of different plasters, tiny plasters, massive plasters. I've got a pair of gloves, like sterile gloves. I've got like cut your own plasters, and then all sorts. I once used like silver plasters, which that you can't seem to buy anymore. But silver plasters are really, really amazing. They're infused with silver, and that really aids the healing process. But I suspect someone probably like called on them and said, you know, these haven't had enough studies on them or something. Then the really exciting side of this has more tick remover tools. We do get a lot of ticks around here. More Compeed, like bandaging stuff, like tape and stuff. I've got some hand gel, very important to make sure you're sterile before you touch someone else. I've got some tea tree essential oil, great for lots of different things, any kind of bites or cuts or any time we need an antiseptic. I've got some cocoa butter lip balm. Again, this could be used for all sorts of different things, not just lips. So anytime you might need a little extra moisture, you've got a little dry patch somewhere. I've got some Arnica 35, which is like a Arnica cream gel, which is really good if you've got sore muscles, and so it's fabulous for like having a little massage session and works really, really well for that. I've got nail clippers. I've got some echinacea, like sweetie, like pastels with vitamin C in them. And I've got some bark rescue pastels, which is, we go through these quite a lot actually. Again, when the kids are feeling a little bit under the weather, or they're feeling a bit nervous about something, or, you know, they just need to calm down, or I do, we'll pop a little rescue pastel, and they work really, really well, and they're very delicious. So that's all that's actually in my first aid kit. I feel like maybe there should be more in there, but it is quite jam-packed, mostly with the temperature thermometer and plasters, and then all the things I just explained. Anyway, it's pretty full. This one, again, it's really chunky. It's probably about 3 inches fat with a massive zip, and it's bright red so we can all find it. So then there's a few things I just keep around the house that will not fit in the bag, but that I find incredibly useful. So hot water bottles, that's like key. Again, keeping people warm is really important, whether that's a warm chest or warm feet, or they just want to snuggle it. hot water bottles I find hugely effective. We have about 4 in the house so that everyone can have one if they needed to. Not that my husband ever uses one. He's very warm. Epsom salts, we always keep Epsom salts, and actually a variety of salts. I think we've got Dead Sea salt and some Himalayan salt there at the minute by the bathtub, so that if anyone needs a salt bath, which actually, to be fair, I think most of the time anyone has a bath, there's some salt in that bath, usually the Epsom salt. Epsom salts particularly are good for adding magnesium, so they help promote sleep, and apparently they're good for constipation as well, but we mostly use them to help everybody relax and get that little magnesium boost at the end of the day. Something I feel like a lot of people will mention in a podcast like this is supplementation or supplements. I don't really keep a lot of supplements. We occasionally have like a vitamin sweetie or vitamin tablet, but it's not every day, and I have over the past taken supplements, but I do feel like if I'm going to supplement, I'll just try and use real foods and make sure I'm getting kind of my supplements through real whole foods instead. Raw honey is, especially if it's local, is really very good for so many things. You can use it topically, so like if you've got a cut, you can actually put the honey straight on the top of that and it will help heal it and stop it from getting any kind of infections. But also it's a really, really good thing to have through cold season to just prevent. And I just think honey is a wonderful thing. It's difficult to find a raw local honey at your supermarket, or I have found it that way anyway. But I have found raw local honey at like my local farm shop, and actually they seem to sell it a fair amount at kind of like craft shows or like local produce fairs and stuff like that. I also wrote down coffee, because whilst for sort of most people, I think coffee is just something that we enjoy every day. I'm very sensitive to coffee, so I don't have coffee most of the time. Coffee for me, I'll have coffee at a weekend, sort of just sometimes to enjoy, and then sometimes I'll have a coffee as a laxative because it works phenomenally well to help keep things moving, and I'm pretty sure that's why sort of nations that drink coffee all the time are quite healthy nations. We also have an aloe vera plant, so we keep an aloe vera plant upstairs. It needs very little love and care. In fact, sits in a really tiny pot and gets watered very infrequently and somehow still survives. But aloe vera is fabulous for so many things. It's very soothing on sort of patches of skin that feel a bit funky, whether you've got a rash or a sunburn, and it's just so much better fresh from a plant, and the plant is so abundant and really happy to sit inside the house. So we've had the aloe vera plant for years and years and years, and it just sits there and gets used when it needs to and survives. Coconut oil is a lovely thing to keep on hand as well in that vein, because it's a really good moisturizer, a really good barrier, and it's also kind of like, I feel like it's antiseptic, antifungal, maybe. I feel like coconut oil has a lot of benefits as a moisturizer, much better than any other kind of cream that you could use. So I do keep coconut oil very close to hand and use it on dry skin and all those different kind of patches. In fact, when my son did get a sunburn this year, we did a sort of immediate aloe vera treatment. I kind of had to surprise him with a bunch of aloe vera and just sort of whack it on there because he wasn't sure about me touching him with aloe vera, but it did work a treat. And then the following day I did the same thing and surprised him with hands covered in coconut oil and just rubbed it in, and it was sort of gone within 24 hours. So that was really fabulous. Broth, chicken stock in particular, is our sort of thing we have all of the time. In fact, there's some brewing on the stove right now. Stock has so many uses in the kitchen, so whether it's for gravy or soup or stew, I'm pretty much always making broth, but it also has really good benefits for you. It has lots of gelatin in it, and it can be very healing on your gut and really good for your joints. So it's something that we have. I don't feel like it's a miracle food. I feel like some people will probably say it's a miracle food, but I just find it tremendously warming and nourishing, and I feel really good after I have it. Probiotics is something that we keep lots of different types of in the fridge. So we've got sourdough. I make gluten-free sourdough. Yogurt, there's some yogurt currently yogurting in my pantry, and then things like sauerkraut or kefir or kimchi. All these probiotics are really, really good, especially if, like me in the 90s, you took quite a lot of antibiotics. then you need lots of probiotics to counteract the aunties. So we keep lots of probiotics on hand. What else do we have? We have kombucha in the fridge. We also have like mature organic cheddar. We keep miso in paste for making miso soup, probably once a week. My kids really, really love miso soup. Fermented vegetables, pickles. There are so many ways to add positive things that really do your gut well, and there's lots of other things that I could talk about, like fruits and vegetables and whole grains and nuts and seeds. There's so many wonderful food substances that really heal your body. In fact, I have a fabulous book that also talks about this. Another fantastic resource is Prescription for Nutritional Healing by Phyllis A. Balch. I'm not sure I've ever read her name before. It is hugely massive. It's such a fat book, and it goes through things A to Z, but it's talking about different kinds of sicknesses and then how you would treat them, different things to consider, different nutrients that you would need and where you can get them. And it is very, very dense and full of detail, and I am looking to this a lot, from something just as simple as a cough to something more complex like, I don't know, like a weird eye thing. It's got like lots of different pieces of advice. And actually there's one more book which is related to this whole topic, which is, there's like a Reader's Digest, 1001 Home Remedies, Trustworthy Treatments for Everyday Health Problems. And like I said, that's Reader's Digest. And it's actually really helpful. It's very herbal, practical, holistic, and yeah, it talks about some of the really basic things you might get and what you could do at home. And I feel like because it's Reader's Digest, it's very sort of people friendly and very accessible for everybody. So I really recommend that if you're really sort of starting out on something. I think I picked this one up at a charity shop actually, and I was like, oh, that's great. But I'm not sure they're always as effective, the remedies in that, as some of the other books. But they recommend having chicken stock and following different types of diets, or I don't know. There's lots of things about that book that really surprised me. And then I feel the last thing to mention is that if you're dealing with anything more serious, if anyone in our family, our like immediate family and like slightly further out family, it's like protocol in our family to just stop having gluten, dairy and sugar for a couple of weeks, and that fixes quite a lot of problems. And it's ultimately very easy to do because you just eat meat and fruit and veg and nuts and seeds, and that's very simple to do for a couple of weeks. But that does seem to get rid of a lot of things, because gluten and dairy and sugar can be really inflammatory to the body, and if you cut out that inflammation, then you can really help your body heal in a short space of time. Okay, I'm going to stop there for today. I feel like there are probably more things I could say, but those are the like top basics that I wrote down, top of my head thoughts and things that I've learnt, things that I find work for me and our family. I think the best way of learning kind of herbal remedies is to learn from each other, because I think most families have some kind of random thing that they've learnt over time. And the way I've learnt most of my information is different families or different individuals have like this one thing that they use that's a bit outside the allopathic kind of way of thinking. And so like arnica or rescue remedies came from one person, and a peppermint essential oil roller came from somebody else, and the meadowsweet came from somebody else. And so just all these different bits of information combined to make quite an amazing concoction of first aid and wellness information. And as much as I could read front to back those books, I'm still not going to learn as much key information on how to brew something or where to buy something or what brand to use as learning it from my friend or neighbour or someone that listens to this podcast. So do make sure you're following over on Instagram at the English Homemaker, and I would love to hear what you use in your first aid kit, anything that I didn't mention, anything I did mention that you also find really works really well. I'd love to hear and sort of, just hear that information. There's one other resource I want to share with you that I'll make sure is linked in the description. And I don't know if you know Beth Barbeau of Indigo Forest, but she is a fantastic resource of wellness information. And she did a blog post all about her college first aid kit essentials that she was sending her kids to college with. And that was super interesting and helpful. So I'll make sure that's linked if you want that information as well. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. Thank you for spending time with me, your precious time. And I really hope you learned something today. If you did, I'd love for you to share this episode with a friend or family member. I'd love for you to leave me a review on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you're listening from. That really helps boost the podcast, shares it with other people, and it supports what I do here. So I really appreciate you spending time to do that. And otherwise, I really hope you have a very happy, very healthy rest of your day and week. And thank you for listening. Bye.